So in this video, I'm going to be talking about Jakob Nielsen's 10 heuristics for user interface design. And some of those words probably make no sense to you, but essentially if you're designing a product that people are going to interact with, so whether that's a website or an app, or even I think a lot of these principles would apply to physical objects as well. These are just basic rules that you can use as a sanity check to make sure that you're really being considerate about the people using the designs that you're creating and giving those users the best possible experience they can get. So these heuristics were created by Jakob Nielsen, and this is the page on his website that lists all these different heuristics out. So I'll definitely link these in the description. So if you ever want to reference them by themselves, they'll all be there. But some of these are a little bit hard to understand what they mean if you just read the title and the very short description under them. So I'll go through these one by one and also give you some real world examples running through the Amazon website, showing how these work in practice. And although these might seem fairly standard and expected, no matter how long you've been designing products, it's always good to go back to the basics and really use this as a checklist to make sure you covered everything that you need to cover. So first up here is visibility of system status. So the description given by Jakob Nielsen is the system should always keep users informed about what is going on through appropriate feedback within reasonable time. So with this, it's important to keep in mind the idea of feedback. It's important to provide good feedback to actions users take. So some examples here are when you hover over a link and it underlines. It lets you know that that's a clickable link. It's a very small clue as to what to expect when doing something. Or if you're in Gmail and you mark a conversation as read or you delete it, a notification will typically pop up that allows you to undo that action. So that's just a really helpful thing, letting you know that an action has occurred, and also in that case, giving you a possibility to undo or correct that action if it was by mistake. And then there's general availability, and that's the system telling you if it's able to accept input. So if you're a Mac user, you're probably well familiar with the spinning wheel of death or the spinning beach ball that lets you know the system is thinking and can't currently act. That's the system's way of telling you, hey, I can't do anything right now, just hold on a little bit, to hopefully prevent you from doing a bunch of actions that you're unable to actually take. And also a really common one is something like an installation bar or a download percentage, just letting you know the expectations of time until the download or the action you're trying to do completes. So if we jump over to Amazon here, if I hover over these top navigation items, and they might be pretty small, but they're actively underlining, letting me know that these are likely clickable links. And it doesn't apply to everything here, but I hovered over these images, which brings up this little scroll bar. So that lets me know that I have an option to also scroll horizontally in case I didn't notice these arrows right here, which sometimes people can miss. So if you provide one or the other, they may or may not find them, but the combination of these two gives me a lot of feedback about what actions I can possibly take. And also as I scroll over items on this one, it brings up these quick look bars, letting me know that this is something that's clickable, and also there's a quick look option if I want that. And just in general, if you look at my mouse cursor, and this is a system example of this, so on the left here, when I move this around, you can tell that it's an arrow pointer, probably really small on your screen. But when I hover over something that turns into a clickable link, it becomes a hand icon, which lets me know that I'm able to click this, that there's further action to take. So there's tons of these little clues everywhere when you interact with designs. And when you really spend the time to make sure that you're using them appropriately and that the user has all the information that they need to complete the actions, it can actually make for a much better experience with relatively little effort. So next up here is match between system and real world. So the basic description there is the system should speak the user's language with words, phrases, and concepts familiar to the user rather than system-oriented terms. You want to follow real-world conventions, making information appear in a natural and logical order. So some basic examples of this, if you run into an error and that error gives you a message like path 2121 not found, that probably means nothing to you, as opposed to something that's much more helpful when you get an error message for an incorrect password and it informs you that you had an incorrect password or that there was no email on file for the email you listed. Using real words that people can actually understand and then take action on are almost always preferable to really detailed, more system-based warnings and messages. And some good examples of a good match between system and real world are concepts like shopping carts. People use the term shopping cart because pretty much everyone understands, that's a place that you put products inside. So when you use a shopping cart or a shopping cart icon, people tend to know exactly what that is without any need of explanation, which saves that user's time and actually will probably make your design more efficient if you're running an e-commerce store. Or folder icons. So way back on Windows 95, for example, there were folder icons that allowed people to know like, hey, I can put stuff inside of this folder. Just little tiny clues to give people a better idea of what that particular thing is for if they've never seen it before. The recycling or trash bin on a Windows or Mac machine is the exact same idea. It lets you know that's a place where you throw things that you want to discard. Little clues that just help you save time in understanding things. So on an Amazon product like this, once this loads up here, there's add to cart with a little shopping cart icon as well as a buy now button. And you'll also notice that in this case, I can't do this because I'm not signed in. So there's a little red cross mark letting me know I can't add this to cart and I can't buy it now, which is kind of interesting. It doesn't do this on all products, but it seems to be doing it on this particular one. Next up is user control and freedom. So users often choose system functions by mistake and will need a clearly marked emergency exit to leave the unwanted state without having to go through an extended dialogue. So to sum that up really simply, you want to support undo and redo. So give the ability to cancel a long download if someone clicks that by mistake, for example. If someone starts downloading a 30 gigabyte file and they don't actually want that file, there's no reason to make them complete that entire long process before they can exit out of it. Not only does it save you money when it comes to the cost of serving that download, but it saves that user a lot of time and they'll be much more happy for the ability to exit out. And then just basic undo and redo functionality. Anytime you make a mistake, you just want to fix that mistake as soon as possible. So users want the ability to do that, and therefore you should give it to them. So back to the Amazon example here, I'll try to go to a product that will let me actually add this to cart, which hopefully one of these memory cards will allow me to do. So I can go ahead and add this particular memory card to cart here, which will bring me to a page where I can then view my cart. So if I go to my cart and I decide I don't want this particular item, there's a delete button that lets me very easily remove it. There's also a quantity button. So if I accidentally put 5 in here by mistake, I can go ahead and, well, in this case, it gives me another warning saying there's a maximum of 2 of these per customer. But if I only want 1 instead of 2, it's very easy for me to go back, switch that to 1, so I don't have to waste a lot of time resetting up my cart. And then if I didn't want this altogether, I can go ahead and delete it, in which case it is removed. So this experience just helps me use this website a little bit quicker, a little bit more efficiently. For example, if I filled up my shopping cart with a bunch of stuff I didn't actually want and had no way of removing those items, that shopping cart would no longer be usable to me. It would basically be in a stuck state that I couldn't fix on my own, and I would therefore not be able to complete my purchase on Amazon, which doesn't help me, and it certainly doesn't help Jeff Bezos at Amazon. So consistency and standards is the next one. Users should not have to wonder whether different words, situations, or actions mean the same thing. Follow platform conventions. So for example, using the word save versus commit. You basically want to pick one or the other and then always use that language throughout your entire application. If you say save somewhere and then commit somewhere else, that might make the person be a little bit confused as to what the expectation of that action is. And with layout, you want to be consistent with how you lay out items in your designs. Follow patterns that make sense to the users. So with Google Sheets versus Google Docs, I'll just exit out of this presentation quick to show you this. The basic way this is laid out at the top here with this menu is consistent across all of Google's various platforms. So Google Sheets, Google Docs, in this case, Google Slides. So I always know that the file is going to be in the upper left-hand corner where my options will be there. Those options tend to be the same across all these different platforms. And although the top things might change contextually based on what I'm using, for example, Google Sheets will definitely have different options up here than Google Slides, I can at least know, generally speaking, where to look for the things that I need. And then for behavior, you want to make things that work in a way that matches the expectation of the user, or mental models. So a mental model is how someone perceives something should work before they actually ever use that particular thing. So if you design things that don't work in a way that the user expects, they might become confused or use the thing wrong, which won't allow them to complete what they're trying to do. A very common real-world example of this is poorly designed doors, oddly enough. A lot of times you'll see someone accidentally push a door that they had to pull, or pull at a door that they actually have to push. And generally that's because the way that door acted broke the mental model of the person trying to use it. They expected the door to behave one way, they acted on that, and then they were probably met with frustration as they felt they looked silly when they were trying to open a door incorrectly. So you always want to do things that make it really easy to understand what to expect. So for example, if I click on one of these items, I expect to be taken to that item. And if I was brought somewhere else, that would break my mental model of how Amazon should work and probably make me be a bit frustrated with what's going on. Next up is error prevention. So even better than good error messages is a careful design which prevents a problem from occurring in the first place. So you either want to eliminate error-prone conditions or situations, or check for them and present users with a confirmation option before they commit to the action. So there's a few different ways you can do this. One of them is providing constraints. So an example there is if it asks you what day in a particular month your birthday is on and you enter 132, that's impossible. There's no way you can be born on that particular day. So the form should therefore prevent you from even entering that to save you from that potential error from happening. You want to provide feedback, so notify people if they enter a field incorrectly. An example is an email address. I'm sure many times before you've entered an email address either incorrectly or one that was already in the system, and typically they'll let you know what the case is there. So if it's an impossible email address, which was entered incorrectly, it'll say not a valid email. And if it's an email that already exists in the system, it'll probably give you an option to log in using that email, or at least let you know this is already an email that's in the system and you should take a different action than create a new account. And also allow people to confirm risky choices. And what is a risky choice? It's something like emptying a trash bin, where you could perhaps have accidentally put something important in the trash or recycling bin, and before you go ahead and empty that, you probably want a safety check to make sure that's something you actually want to do. Or much like the download example before, if you're downloading a very large file, you might want an option to confirm canceling that download. If you're, for example, 15 gigabytes into a 30 gigabyte download, accidentally canceling that download when you didn't mean to would be highly frustrating because it's a big waste of time. So allowing the user to make sure they want to make a more risky choice is almost always a good user experience move. Next up here is recognition rather than recall. So the general idea here is to minimize the user's memory load by making objects, actions, and options visible. The user should not have to remember information from one part of the dialogue to another. Instructions for use of the system should be visible or easily retrievable whenever appropriate. So some pretty basic examples here are direct manipulation, and that's essentially a user interface. So graphical interfaces that show people the appropriate buttons when needed. So if we jump over to Amazon here, I don't really have to remember much of anything when browsing Amazon. All my options are listed out here on the screen right below me. I can also use this to find certain departments. So if I'm looking for whatever the case might be, electronics, if I go there, it gives me the appropriate options that I can go to within that without me having to remember what are the various categories under electronics, for example. It presents me with all these, so I never have to remember anything if I don't want to. So that just speeds up my process of finding what I'm looking for and also makes Amazon much more usable for me. In like some of the other examples of these heuristics, it'll always place the same options to further sort or find these in the left-hand corner, so I know to go right there to find those no matter what category I'm in. This is consistent across the entire platform, which makes it a much more usable experience. An example of something that forces users to recall is a password. There's really no way around having to remember a password unless you're using a password management program, which is probably an ideal thing to do. But it's not possible in every case to make people recognize their particular information, so in some cases you need recall. And then there's sort of mixed ones like speech UIs, which Alexa or Siri are two examples of this, which while both of these do their best not to make you have to recall any information, as you should be able to simply ask them a question and then they can find the answer or help you go from that question, but sometimes they're just not good enough yet to understand what the question means or what you're trying to achieve. So in those cases, sometimes you can ask them for help about available commands, which can help bridge the gap between the need to recall that information rather than the system just recognizing what it's looking for and helping you automatically. Next up is flexibility and efficiency of use. So accelerators, unseen by the novice or the new user, may often speed up the interaction for the expert user, such that the system can cater to both inexperienced and experienced users. Allow users to tailor frequent actions. So some really common examples of this are keyboard shortcuts, which if you know a program really well, the shortcuts will likely save you a lot of time. So if I bring up Photoshop right here, I can hit Control-N or Command-N to open up a new file. It brings up this dialog box without me having to go to File and then New. So little things like that can save the experienced user a lot of time, especially if they use the program consistently throughout a day, but also don't hinder the user who doesn't know that that command exists, because they can still go to File and then New to complete that command. But just little shortcuts save people time, and people appreciate the ability to do that. Also, bookmarks are a very common example of this on web browsers. I use bookmarks all the time to save me from having to remember the web address. So the recognition rather than recall thing sort of applies there too, where I might remember a particular website's address, but it's much more efficient if that becomes part of the browser's UI, where I can simply click a button that says something like Creative Market, and then it will take me there rather than me having to remember that particular address. And then there's personalized interfaces. So once again, with something like Photoshop, you can pick and choose what you want on that interface. So I can go ahead and add history from the window command, which will bring up a window here and allow me to customize this exactly how I want it. I can move these boxes around. Photoshop is a program that provides a particularly strong ability to manipulate and customize the interface, and because of that, you can usually tailor it to your particular needs and workflow style, which once again just saves you a lot of time and makes the program feel more like it was built for you, rather than forcing you to use it in a particular way. And next up here we have aesthetic and minimalist design. So dialogues should not contain information which is irrelevant or rarely needed. Every extra unit of information in a dialogue competes with the relevant units of information and diminishes their relative visibility. So that's a mouthful to say, for sure. But a really good example of this is if I just open up Google and go to the Google homepage. So if I go to google.com, there is really only one thing Google wants me to do here, except apparently watch the NBA Finals, which I'll say, no thanks, get out of here. But there's a big search bar that allows you to search for what you're looking for, and then only two buttons, Google search and I'm feeling lucky. So for example, if I search for cars right here, it'll give me some options too about other relevant searches based on this, which is pretty helpful as a way of helping you complete what you're looking for. But I just click that, and as soon as I actually do that, it brings me to the search results for cars. So a very easy form to use that really makes the users complete the desired action, which is completing a search, and there's nothing really here to distract me from doing that. This is perhaps the best example online of a website that strips back everything you don't need until you complete that action and doesn't overload the user with a bunch of garbage they don't have to see to complete that action. Another example is Amazon search results. So products are ordered in a grid that lets you know their products, which might sound really simple and straightforward, but if I were to do something like search for 4K monitor. So the way products are presented on this page is all the products tend to be in a vertical row. So it's very easy for me to know that products here are products because they're right on top of each other. They all follow the exact same pattern. It's very easy for me to understand what is and what isn't a product, which is perhaps even more easy because there's really just products here. But I know what to expect when I'm looking through this page. Another great example would be Zappos, which sells shoes. So if I go to Zappos and do a search for Pumas, it'll bring up a really easy grid here, which will give me various options for shoes and apparently apparel. And I know everything in this grid is a product because everything is following the exact same patterns. The titles, the descriptions, and the prices also all follow the exact same patterns, and there isn't any really distracting information here to pull me away from what I'm actually trying to see, which is the product that I searched for. So doing things that make sense and are very organized and also not filled with distractions. If you look at this entire page right now, it's literally just the products, the relevant information for those products, and everything else is white space. So an excellent example of minimalist design right here. And as I said, throughout those examples, avoid distracting elements that are not needed. So with both Google as well as the Zappos example, tons of white space around the desired action, with pretty much the desired action or the thing that you're looking for being the only focus there. Next up is help users recognize, diagnose, and recover from errors. So error messages should be expressed in plain language, no codes, and precisely indicate the problem and constructively suggest a solution. And we covered this a little bit before when I talked about the weird error messages and how to handle those better, but this is realistically a mixture of the other heuristics we've talked about. So when you give someone something like an error message, you want to give feedback, and you want to use language the user understands. So when you're giving feedback, you want to tell them what's wrong, and you don't want to give them abstract numbers or codes that they'll have to search for, or maybe would have no way of understanding what that meant. And you also want to allow users to exit or undo mistakes. So if they run into a problem, whenever possible, allow them to go backwards or leave that problem. Maybe it could be as simple as them entering a form incorrectly, in which case give them the ability to fix the error before it locks them out from doing that. And you also want to prevent errors as they happen, like the impossible birthday example. So if someone enters something, maybe a credit card number that's simply too long to be real, let them know that they made a mistake there and then give them the opportunity to fix that. It's probably a pretty common thing for almost everyone to have entered a credit card incorrectly or the CSV code wrong, in which case the really good systems will let you know you made a mistake and then give you a very easy solution to correct that. So an example of this is 404 pages, which can be super frustrating if they're poorly made. If the 404 page gives you no idea what went wrong and just says error 404, you might not know what that means. And I'd probably think most people don't know what that means, aside from the page didn't load for whatever reason. So when you give people more contextual examples, like if you're searching for something and there's no results, perhaps it could try to suggest some alternative things that might be related to the search term you were looking for, rather than just giving you a blank page that gives you no further help as far as what you're trying to accomplish. Certainly easier said than done, but also something that should always be kept in mind when you're designing a product. And last up here is help and documentation. So even though it's better if the system can be used without documentation, it might be necessary to provide help and documentation. Any such information should be easy to search, focused on the user's task, and list concrete steps to be carried out and not be too large. So once again, a bit of a mouthful there, but actually a very simple concept. So an example here would be help files. You want to give users access to help files directed at the task they're trying to complete. You want to streamline this process where possible, and ideally you want this to be searchable, task-focused, just like said above, and direct steps to solve the problem at hand. So for example, if I'm on a website like Amazon or Zappos, and I'm on a product page trying to check out, ideally if there's a help button on that page, clicking that button would bring me somewhere that answers questions about the checkout process, rather than a huge index of every possible question for that website. When you constrain the results a little bit to give people more contextual help to what they're likely looking for, it'll save them a lot of time and allow them to hopefully find the answers that they're looking for on that particular thing. So I think Amazon is a great example of this in ways that are perhaps a bit unexpected. But if I try to find a product, so I'll go to 4K monitors again, wait for this to load up here. And if I click on this sponsored result, it'll bring me to this page, in which case I might have questions about this particular product. So right here at the very top, we have both customer reviews as well as 60 answered questions. So if I look for help on this page, it's likely that I'm looking for information on this product, in which case Amazon gives you really detailed questions right at your fingertips up top. So I can click on this, see a bunch of questions that are most common. It also allows me to easily search through these questions in case I'm looking for something, very simple. So if I type in HDMI in search, it gives me questions about, does it include an HDMI cable, or can I hook it up with an HDMI cable? They're all relevant to the problem that I'm trying to solve, and that made this a very easy and streamlined process. So it's really that level of user interaction that you should strive for when you're trying to design around a product. But that is actually it for Nielsen's 10 heuristics. And once again, I'll link this page, which is just a complete rundown of these without the examples. So if you ever want to check this out or bookmark it and run through this as you complete designs or wireframes of designs to make sure you're covering your bases, that's really best practice. It doesn't matter how long you've been designing, all these things will always apply. And it's actually surprisingly easy to forget to cover one of these, where that little bit of extra effort can make the product or design you're making substantially better for both the person using the product and ultimately you as the designer, because you want to design for the users. You want to make things easy to use. And this is really the most basic set of things that you should make sure you cover to give people the best experience possible. But that's it for this video. a lot of talking, but I do hope you found it helpful. And if you did find it helpful, I'd appreciate you giving me a thumbs up. It just lets me know that this is something useful to you, and perhaps more content like this could be useful for you in the future. Also, if you have any questions or comments about this, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section. I always read through everything, and perhaps other people that are well versed in this can help you out if you have questions around anything, or if you find really good examples of any of these 10 heuristics, or really bad examples of any of these 10 heuristics in use on a particular website. Sometimes examples of things that are doing these very poorly is every bit as interesting to learn from as things that are doing it exceptionally well. But that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching this video, and if you found this helpful and you want to see more stuff like this, please subscribe. I'll do my best to keep creating new content just like this. Thanks for watching.